Howdy folks, I want to really quickly share with you a very deep secret about our realm. Many of you have heard the name Yahweh, YHVH. And in the Abrahamic traditions, this is simply explained as the name of God. But as many of you already know, the spiritual traditions often have an exoteric or an outward explanation for things that contain a deeper esoteric explanation. And this is necessary because during times of forgetfulness, during times whenever, I call them, times of density and things, the traditions are preserved through the generations, through the epochs, through oral tradition, through written tradition, through the stories. But if you were to try and explain like all the intricacies and all the deeper meanings and everything, then it would get lost in interpretation and distorted. So if you keep the story simple and you have a cipher, meaning you know how to read the text, you know what the different symbols mean. This is why in any esoteric society, the language that is spoken is symbology, and this is how you actually move up through the orders as you learn the deeper levels and meanings of the different symbols and how they interact together. It's basically an advanced alphabet. It's the cipher. If you look deeper into the meanings of these traditions, including what is the name of God, what does that mean? Yahweh, YHVH. Then there's some really interesting secrets therein. So much of this actually points back to living geometry. So let's talk about YHVH, YHVH, Yahweh. Yahweh. So whenever you speak words, whenever you move your mouth and project from your vocal cords, you literally into the reality, into the fertile waters of Ninma, Mataher, you project actual living geometries, shapes, frequencies, and these actually influence how Mataher responds and reacts. It impregnates this fertile waters, that impregnates the fertile womb of creation. So then you get into masculine, feminine dynamics, and masculine, feminine, and child, which is like how the whole cycle continues and repeats in new, fresh, novel creativeness. And so when we look at what is the geometry that is projected when we say the name Yahweh, Yahweh actually contains all the vowels in one word, and it starts at the most contracted point. It opens up to the most expanded point possible, and it goes back into the most retracted point. So what does this create? It creates two phase conjugate interlacing cones. So you can see the most contracted point, E, all the way to the most open point, Yow, all the way back to the most contracted point. Way. And if you could think about it, way. I don't have another hand, but you can imagine here's one cone and the other side is the other cone. What does that look like? An infinity symbol or a torus. The torus is the blueprint geometry for this realm. The torus is created through golden mean implosion, acceleration towards center, blah, blah, blah. We can get in all that later. But the key here is that the geometry that is projected when one says Yahweh is two interlacing phase conjugate cones. That is the audio symbol of the blueprint geometry that is self-similar and repeating at all scales. What does this mean? That means that every atom has a toroid around it. Every cell has a toric weak electric field around it. Every organ system has a toric field around it. Every body has a toric field around it. We call this an aura. Every tree, every plant, every animal, even like the planet, even at larger scales, there's a self-similar geometry. This is called, and that's what we call a fractal, is self-similarity at all scales. there's this fractal toroidal geometry at all scales that is the blueprint of this realm, blueprint of creation. So that's a hint. And then if we look a little deeper, we look into what is the actual translation of YHVH, taking into account the most ancient forms of Hebrew, taking into account gematria, which is the connection of numbers with the Hebrew alphabet. Well, if you look at a book written by Greg Braden, it's called The God Code, I believe. He breaks it all down and looks in, does all the research around this study of gematria and the word Yahweh, and what the actual translation, the most true, the most deep translation of YHVH is God eternal within the body. So if you think about the idea that creation was made in the image of God, not the fullness of God, because there's a mystery that is projecting through creation. There's a mystery that's projecting through geometry, through expression. There is a unexpressed mystery that's beyond comprehension, that is the fullness of God. But there is the image of God that all was made within, the expression of God. And it appears that that image, or that blueprint geometry, is toroidal. And when you say Yahweh, YHVH, Yahweh, you're actually expressing that toroidal geometry with the mouth. And so it makes sense why that would be translated as God eternal within the body, because that geometry is at every scale, all the way down to the atoms and quarks, all the way up to in every expression of the full body of God, the full temple of God, which is this realm and this creation. So how can we take and use this knowledge in our prayer and our manifestations and our understanding? We know that the toroid is often referred to as the self-containing seed. And because it has it's basically the whole story of creation in one geometry. So if we say this, if we go into a quiet place, into a meditative place, and we go through the syllables, we go through the Yahweh name, and every tradition has this. The Taoist traditions have it. There's something called Kododama, where they do different order and expression of the different vowels in order to create different aspects of consciousness, and different, they call it to go to different dimensions of consciousness. It's called Kododama. If we do this practice of going through the vowels, we create these two interlacing phase conjugate cones, then it's kind of like we create a vessel. And if we do this with positive intent, with gratitude, with a knowing in the power, with the understanding of the divinity and of the sacredness of this sound, and we go in and we really use that as a vessel and a transporter and a carrier of our higher intentions, then I believe, and in my own life it's manifest very powerfully in this way, that you can use this sacred knowledge and this toning to powerfully heal the body, harmonize the toroids within the body, but also impregnate and project powerful visions and manifestations into the fertile water of the Divine Mother. Ninma, Mataher, Ma, Mater, Mother. And it shall not, and with this intention, and with this positive intent, those visions and projections shall go into the womb and not come back void. I hope you enjoyed this teaching. Please reach out if you have questions or insights that you want to share. And as always, I'm wishing you the best of health, and I love you.